just a real branches that have a real wide angle like this are super strong. And they're the most strongest ones. You can a small branch like this you could use as a foothold to climb a tree on that. But a steep branch like that, you put your foot between there and it'll just break off. So these are really weak and these are really strong. So, you'll find that when you start learning all the different species of trees, you'll know right off the bat what species have really strong branch patterns and which ones don't. We talked really just briefly about pyramidal trees and columnar trees. Super popular these days. They're great in the landscape because they have that nice narrow shape. We're in a situation where the yards are maybe not as big as they used to be. They're small and compact, so people use columnar trees because they just fit in nicely. But columnar trees are highly prone to included bark because all the branches are ascending. They're all growing upright, right? So that, that's a sort of a different situation where you're going to have like hundreds and hundreds of branches coming off the trunk instead of just two, right? So they're not as big and not as heavy and not as dangerous as other trees. So it's still wise to check them. And if you end up later down the road having maybe two predominantly huge ones, well, somebody's got to keep an eye on. If you have a situation like this, you can have an arborist go in and climb up and they can actually cable it together. And as soon as you see that, you bring it to somebody's attention right away. It's like, do you know I have a dangerous tree here? It's got to be cabled, right? So somebody's got to go up. It's really one of our only options. It's either that or remove the tree. Trees have a lot of value, especially when they get to be big. So if you got a good arborist, he'll go up the tree, climb right up to the top, up nice and high, put in a cable, and the cable will be just slightly loose. It won't be tight. It's got to have a little bit of movement to it. And all it does is keep that tree within a certain checkpoint, so it's not going to flex beyond the point where it's going to cause damage. So that's one of the more important factors with trees. So when we go to do the pruning, we often find that we see discoloration inside the stems. And, we'll talk a little bit more about the tools here in a bit, but sometimes when we have tools and we're cutting through trees, it's nice to know a little bit about what disease looks like when it's inside of a tree. And you can see the staining in there. These are fairly serious diseases. This is a verticillium wilt. It's a fungus that lives inside the stems of the trees. And when you see that, the trees, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be toast. But you can see this whole tree here is being affected by it. This is a different type of disease, more of a canker disease, but it's caused quite a bit of a sunken area on this side of the tree here. And it's really stunted that main shoot. And so these are diseases that live in the sieve tubes. There's tubes inside the tree, inside the wood, where water goes up into the trees. And these diseases live inside those sieve tubes. So as they grow, they cause discoloration and die back inside the wood. But you'll often see death or dieback or stunting. And you get a tree, let's say we planted this tree a few years ago, let's say, and this was the main leader. And then we come along, we look at the tree, we come back later, and there's this huge branch like this on the side, and it's far exceeding. It goes right past that original leader, and it's way up there. And you probably notice that sometimes. You'll see a tree, looks like a little tree, there's this huge branch growing off of it. Because this one's plugged, full of disease, right? It's got the disease inside of it. So there's not as much water and nutrients and stuff going up in this one. Whereas the roots are still fairly healthy, so they want to keep growing. So they bypass that main shoot and it continues to grow on the side. Sometimes people go like, oh, wow, that's a huge branch. Cut that off. So they cut it off. That's the only healthy wood on the tree, right? You got to cut this one off and smaller off to get rid of it. It's full of disease issues. So there's several different types of diseases that cause these, but verticillium is one of the main ones. And this one, I'll pass this one around. It actually says verticillium wilt right on this. You can just pass it around and have a look at it. Verticillium is very predominant in this valley. It's all over the place. And it's in predominantly maple trees, smoke bushes. Smoke bushes. Oh yeah, you see smoke bush. Common symptom is the tree, because it's living in the seed tubes where the water goes, right? So it starts to plug it up. So in the springtime, the thing's growing, it looks fine. No problem. It starts to get hot out, it starts to wilt a little bit. But parts of the tree are normal and parts of the tree are looking diseased. Then when it gets really hot out, you get catastrophic dieback, like chunks of the tree are crispy. So you get a branch that's crispy and the rest looks fine. That's a bad symptom, right? That means that there's something in those branches. There's something in there. there's something in there that's plugging up those sieve tubes. So in most cases, it's a disease like this with like verticillium. So the thing with verticillium wilt is that it actually is soil borne. It means the fungus lives in the soil, and you plant a tree in there, it gets absorbed up through the root system, and it goes up into the little seed tubes, and it lodges wherever it lodges, it starts to grow. Kills that part of the tree. And again, you'll see the wilting. Sometimes you'll even see in the wintertime, the leaves stick on the tree in the wintertime. They don't fall off. You might notice that sometimes. You have a bunch of Japanese maples. All Japanese maples are highly subject to this disease. Does anybody know what Cercis canadensis is? That particular type of tree, they have a heart-shaped leaf. Cercis means heart-shaped. And Cercis canadensis, lots of people love them. Redbud's a common name, eastern redbud. Not really a good tree for this climate because they're acid livers and they're highly subject to verticillium wilt. So what happens with those? They just die super fast. And they just don't make it. So again, go to the nurseries, they sell tons of redbud trees. And the maples are not too bad, but you have to really inspect the trees when you buy them to make sure they don't have symptoms of verticillium when you get it.
So a maple that doesn't have it, the leaves will fall off like completely here. Like
trees it. Oh, in the fall.
Like every time I do a Japanese maple, the leaves are always stuck in the spray. You have to leaf the heck out of the thing.
Well, sometimes that is a symptom that there's some disease in the tissues inside the wood, but sometimes it's just because they get frosted a bit prematurely in the fall.
Oh, and then it doesn't drop.
There's a hormone that's released by the plants called abscisic acid. And what it does is it's released from the stems when the days get short and the temperatures get cool, and it just forms a layer that causes a leaf to shed. But it's a long, slow process to doing that. And if you get that zap of frost, it kills the leaf. So the leaf and that hormone reaction stops, and they just stick on the tree. Some species, like some types of oaks, keep their leaves in the wintertime, and some reed trees do too. So that's it.
Well, what about, like, I drive down the bottom road there, and you see that orchard there, the apple orchard, and all the apples are still on it. Like,
Yeah,
abandoned. Yeah, but how does that, with all the different weather changing, that they actually stay on? Like,
they'll still rot right on. They'll rot right on the tree, and it's a bad thing.
That's
get all the
for a fruit tree. I think that's like the worst thing you can do.
One of the worst things, yeah, especially with soft fruits. But it's a rule. You always remove all the fruit every year, every time, to prevent disease the next year. Not even leaving it laying around on the ground. So the real education process has to go on.
Maybe those are the ones for deer.
Yeah, the deer apples.
As long as they're under 4 feet, and you're okay, I guess.
Yeah. So this is actually a good one. I'll pass it around, and it shows verticillium wilt again, and it shows it how it's actually caused the dieback of the bark. Where you may actually see that kind of a symptom showing up. The bark splits a bit, and part of the side of the tree is dead or dying. So verticillium is a problem here because it's everywhere in the soil, and there really isn't much you can do about it. But the smart thing is if you're the guy on that property, and it's your job to take care of those plants, and you identify it. A smoke bush, what they do, you see, because this disease, verticillium, is not a disease of roots, right? Only a disease of stems. So they keep shooting back from the roots. There's another symptom of the disease, right? Top's dead, shooting up from the base.
Healthy root base, sick top means tons of growth.
Yeah.
You have a huge support network.
Yeah, you got a big root system that's fairly healthy, but the top's dead. So with smoke bushes, that's what happens. Every year they die, you cut them off to the ground, and they shoot up again, and they do okay. They're kind of bad here they like, but they do okay. But the next year they're dead again. So you cut them off again, and every year they shoot up from the bottom. That's not going to be the case with most maples and things, right? When they're done, they're done. But that's a symptom. So what that means is you see a tree, and the first thing you do is you go, oh, I'm just going to cut it, right? Cut the branch and go up. No, it's pretty clean. There's no staining in there. But if you do see the staining inside the wood, you see, especially if you cut it fresh, it's kind of all of the green color. It's been green. Yeah, you cut through that and you go, oh, that's got symptoms of verticillium. First thing that people do, why don't you replace that tree for me? Go ahead, put the same tree back. Guaranteed 100% of the time, things can be dead within 2 to 3 years. If you put in any species that's subject to that disease, that's it, right? So I've had clients that the same thing happened. Somebody had a tree that died, so they put another Japanese maple in, it died, put another one in, it died, put another one in, it died. So he said, well, no more Japanese maples. So they went to Cercis redbuds. They started putting redbud, put a redbud in, it died, put another one in, it died. And then I came along and I went, well, it's got verticillium wilt. It's probably the problem is
So is that a soil excavation?
No, you have to pick the right species because there's many species that are not subject to the disease. Right? So you pick the right species and that's your replacement lot. But don't put a smoke bush in, right? But you can put other species. But if you look at the verticillium resistance is really important, right? So you can look that up in the internet. It's available anywhere for lists of verticillium resistant species. And that's one of the reasons why we're pruning is to make sure that we're taking care of the disease stuff. And we're, as professionals, we need to know that we can look at a tree and say, gee, that's in, it's in good shape or bad shape. You cut a branch off. When I cut off the wood, I look at it before I check it, right? In the Okanagan, with so many fruit trees around, well, a lot of the prunus species, anything that's related to prunus, so that's anything with a single stone, is subject to verticillium. Or could be. It's susceptible to it. So what happens is all the orchards and all the work that they do here over the years and all the expansion of houses and buildings and everything, they scraped all that soil off from those orchards and distributed everywhere as topsoil. That's where it comes from, right? It's in the soil. So the next thing we're just going to talk a little bit about is when we're actually doing some pruning and we do a little bit of saw work, cutting off branches and things. And again, we talk about the proper way to cut off a branch, not to cut it along the end. If you had a branch sticking out of a tree and, you can cut one of the branches off the side if you want, or if you get a branch that goes out and it's pretty well tapered, but you want to reduce it a bit, as long as you're cutting it to another branch that's within a reasonable size of that branch, you can do that. You can take off a tip and let another one join, and you can actually direct its growth so that it goes where you want it to. But one of the things that happens is that when we cut a branch off, there's confusion as to how do we cut a branch off, right? And this is actually it's not bad. You typically want to be looking at the right angles to the tree itself, right? Or to the branch itself, not to the tree. In the old days, if somebody was going to cut this branch off, they'd say, cut it like this, They'd say, cut it right square to the tree. That's how they always recommended. It was in a lot of the, you get an old pruning book and open it up and look at the instructions on how to prune, right? You usually got a lot of wrong stuff in it. You got to get the newer information, at least within 20 years or so. So, there's a mark on this tree of sort of where to cut this. But the reason is that we have to clearly understand what is a branch and what is a trunk, right? So this is the trunk and this is the branch. And where do they come together? Where do they meet? So if in doubt, what you do is you just cut the branch off and maybe leave it a little bit long, like maybe a half an inch long. Because if you can't tell where the branch collar is, so I'm going to show you where the branch collar is. So you're looking for a swollen area around the base of the branch that actually is the trunk and not the branch. The branch grows from the center of the trunk outwards. So if I cut through like this and cut it square to that branch, I'm going to cut into the collar, which is the trunk. As soon as I damage that trunk, you're in bad shape. That tree is going to be permanently damaged from that. And sometimes they'll recover, but sometimes they'll just become a disease issue and this goes on and on into the future. So if you can't tell where a branch collar is, you just cut it a little extra long, cut square to the branch, straight across the branch, and remove it and then leave it. And you can always come back to later or the next year and you'll see where that branch collar is. It'll swell up and get ready to heal that tree. And then you can cut the little nub off the end if you want to. But it's just amazing at how the trees will heal themselves if you cut it right. In the old days too, they used to say, don't leave a stub. Even when I started in horticulture, we're always telling people that, don't leave the stub too long, right? And they're right. You don't want to leave a big long stub sticking out, but you should leave a little stub because it's amazing how the tree will grow over top of that.